Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, welcome back to our series on business cycles in the Economic Environment and Business Strategy course. In this session, we will look at three important macroeconomic episodes that shape modern economic thinking and policy. We begin with the 1973-75 recession, the first major global downturn after World War II, marked by stagflation, a rare combination of high inflation and high unemployment, driven by oil crisis, collapse of Bretton Woods system, and increased global competition. Next is the 1981-82 recession, caused largely by tight monetary policy to control inflation. Though inflation came down, it triggered deep and prolonged unemployment. We then moved to the era of Great Moderation, a period of relative macroeconomic stability from the mid-1980s to 2007. This period saw fewer recessions but ended with the global financial crisis of 2007-8-9, which exposed the hidden vulnerabilities during the economic activities. These episodes highlight how nature of economic shocks and policy responses has evolved over time. So let's start with the oil shock and the 1973-75 recession. So then coming to the 1973-75 recession, why was this recession different? So you know that the Great Depression of the 1929, it led to the birth of macroeconomics, and our understanding of the macroeconomy has henceforth. And because of the Keynesian revolution, most countries across the world, they began to increase government expenditure, most public expenditure program to revive the economy, and everyone thought that the economic future is so bright. However, this optimism met with the pessimism in 1970s, and this was the first major recession after World War II. So for the first time, economy saw both high unemployment and low economic growth rate at the same time, also known as stagflation. So what happened here is that there was the stagflation means low output, that means high unemployment, low output plus high inflation. So that means low GDP plus high inflation. This is a phenomenon economists never experienced before. It took place during the 1970s. So stagflation is a condition of slow economic growth and relatively high unemployment, that is economic stagnation, accompanied by rising prices or inflation. So just let us have a quick overview. What are the conditions before the recession? So in the United States and the Soviet Union and Western European and East Asian countries, they all experience unusually high and sustained economic growth altogether. Even the countries devastated by the World War II experienced by high economic growth by this period. And moreover, the prices of oil, petroleum, were quite low during this period. And most Western countries experienced full employment in the early 1970s. However, as I already mentioned that the 1973-75, this is one of the major recession after the 1930s recession, and there are a series of events led to the recession of 1973-1979. So one is the 1973 oil crisis after the formation of OPEC countries by the Arab nations. OPEC formation by the Arab nations. Then the second was the fall of Bretton Woods system. Then the third one is newly industrialized countries. They increased demand competition, and which led to the steel crisis in the developed world. And there was stock market crash of 1973-74. So coming back to the first one, the 1973 oil price crisis, and this is also known as the first oil price shock in the economic history. And it was caused by the Arab-Israel war, and especially because of many countries, Western countries, they supported Israel in the war. And as a result, 1973, the Arab countries, they formed an organization that's called OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, and then they made a monopoly. And as a result, then what they did that they announced an embargo on the US and its allies for supporting Israel in the war. Then as a result, the prices of oil rose from $3 per barrel to $12 globally. And then you know that oil is one of the key input for all the manufacturing industries. So as a result of the increase in the oil price, that means the increase in the input price, the cost of production increases, and as a result, the aggregate supply that decline. There was it's actually a supply side shock. We can call that it's a supply side shock, mainly because the shock was on the input side, because oil is the one of the major input for manufacturing sector. So you can see from this figure that look at the oil prices here. You can see here, then by 1970, 71, 73, you can see the oil prices increasing. So by 1975, 1977, you can say that there is a skyrocketing increase in the oil prices. The second event that led to the 1972-75 recession was the fall of Bretton Woods system. And in one of the previous lecture, we have discussed what is Bretton Woods system. Bretton Woods system, this is an outcome of the Bretton Woods agreement in the 1945. It effectively made the US dollar as the benchmark currency or the reserve currency for the Western world. And they all followed a fixed exchange rate regime, and the United States agreed to link the dollar to the gold at $35 per ounce. And the countries, those who agreed for this fixed exchange rate, mainly the developed countries, this foreign nation could exchange dollars for gold when they wish. So the international economic situation began changing in the 1960s. What happened during that period was that due to the increase in the US import, US needed to print more and more currency for international trade. So they decided to increase the money supply. Then the issue is that the US was now running a large trade deficit. Dollar continued to flow overseas. You know that because they have been importing and they are making payment in terms of dollar, and most nations like Switzerland and France, they accumulated large amounts of dollar and demanded redemption for gold. But what happened that President Nixon during this period, he understood the magnitude of the problem, because at the same time US economy has been growing, their import requirement also has been growing, and as a result they need more currency, but they didn't have sufficient gold to keep it as a backup, as a reserve. So the US gold reserves began to decline, and most foreign countries who have been holding US dollar began to ask for conversion of their US dollar into gold, and this caused the US to consider abandoning the fixed gold and dollar exchange rate. And President Nixon, he announced that we are abandoning the Bretton Woods system, and the foreign countries who are holding US dollar can no longer ask for converting their dollar into gold. So President Nixon's 10% import tax, this is the one of the policy measure in order to dissuade imports and reduce the trade deficit. In addition, the president also imposed a 90-day wage and price freeze to curtail inflation, because at that time you know that there was 2-digit inflation, and in order to control the inflation, president imposed a 90-day cap on wage and price. In other words, government intervened in the labor market and output market. So that means Normally, if they allow the free market to work, the market mechanism, that the demand and supply would be playing the role, and accordingly the price will be determined, be it in the labor market or in the output market. But since government intervention, that the wage cap for 90 days, what happened that because of the wage price controls, it forced companies to keep wages high, which meant businesses laid off workers to reduce cost. Because they cannot reduce the wage, because that means keeping the wage high, they need to lay off some of the workers to save the cost. And at the same time, there was a cap on the price as well, and then since the aggregate demand was declining, firms want to reduce the price, but because of the freeze imposed, firms couldn't reduce the price as well to stimulate demand. Then another crisis, another issue happened in parallel was steel crisis. It mainly happened because from the production from newly industrialized countries, they also ramped up steel production, saturating global markets. As a result, there was overproduction of steel in the global market, and as a result, there is rising global competition. As a result, the falling the steel prices fell down, and moreover, industrial core hit hard. The policy also, steel consuming industries face cost inflation, job losses, and also is further led to the stagflationary pressures in the economy. So I am showing you the steel production, especially in the 1970s. You can see that during this period, the steel production, the global market was drastically high. Then another event that led to the 1972-75 crisis was the stock market crash. This crash came after the collapse of the Bretton Woods system over the previous 2 years, with the associated Nixon shock and the United States dollar devaluation associated with it. It was compounded by the outbreak of the 1973 oil price high crisis. So I have some text here to show the magnitude of the problem. So you can see that the Dow Jones index, it fell, and also the same problem was reflected in the United Kingdom as well. And as a result, during this period, unemployment reached 9%, GDP declined by 3.2%, and inflation rose to 8.8%. Then the tax cut by 1975, that is one of the policy intervention. The investment purchases financed partly by private borrowing increased in the third quarter by over 19%. So let us also have a quick note on how it ended. It took another Fed chairman and a brutal contractionary monetary policy for inflation to return to single digits. But in the meantime, the unemployment kept increasing, and the US kept enduring jobless numbers that exceeded 10%, and millions of people that were affected till late 1970s. And let us now also have a quick overview of the 1970s recession in the UK. So from this figure, you can see that the inflation in the UK, it was 25, that the 25% in the 1975, that the two-digit inflation in 1974, 75, it continued till 1977. It was accelerating to over 20%, and this was mainly due to rising wages and inflationary budget of 1972, and the growth in credit and consumer spending, as well as the global oil price shock of the 1973, leading to a 70% increase in oil prices. So to trying to deal with the inflation, belatedly the government tried to deal with it through higher interest rates. So the government tried to cap wages. This was fuel for industrial unrest, leading to frequent and widespread strikes in the UK factory. Coal and coke factories were blocked, which at the time produced the majority of the nation power. You know, at that time, the height of the strike, Britain was on a 3-day week, making public appeal to conserve energy. This is about the magnitude of the UK current account deficit issues. You can see the current account deficit became negative during this period. That means they have been facing huge trade deficit during this period. And in 1976, the UK needed to apply for IMF bailout, and this was due to a high budget deficit and also concerns over the value of the sterling. So market believed sterling was overvalued, so kept selling, causing the pound to depreciate. So in 1977, the economy showed signs of recovery and helped by oil revenues, and the balance of payments improved. So the IMF gave the loans to the UK. However, over time, since the pound also strengthened after the loan, UK didn't need to draw out the full loan. So this is the UK's net borrowing as a percentage of the GDP. You can see, especially during this period, this is the crisis time. You can see that the net borrowing as a percentage of the GDP has increased during this period. Then let us also have a quick overview of another recession, that is in 1981 to 82. So the recession of early 1980s, in 1980s there was a recession, but that can be defined as two recessions. One is first extended for 6 months starting from January 1980, and the second extended for 16 months from July 1981. So the US ended recession in January 1980 and returned to growth 6 months later in July 1980. However, by July 1981, again the recession hit the US, and the second recession started. That means the second recession started in July 1981, where the unemployment rate remained unchanged through the during this period. You can see from this figure the inflation soared this period again. You can see here in the early 1980s. The consumer price, the inflation increased, and as well as the output also declined. In this saga of recession, the oil price, the supply side shock also played a role. Oil shock led to a decrease in aggregate supply again, the shifting the aggregate supply curve to the left. This is mainly because the cost of input has increased, and you know that the cost of production increases. As a result, it became a supply side shock, and as a result the aggregate supply curve shifted leftwards. So this led to decrease in output and increase in price level, and also in parallel it led to increase in unemployment rate. You know that when the level of economic activity decline, that the GDP decline, the demand for factors of production also decline, and that means unemployment will take place. There are some more insights on this. This is the prime rate, the short run interest rate in the US. You can see during this period the short run interest rate it increased. That the Fed fund rate, the rate at which one bank borrow from the another bank, it increased. It became 2-digit, and as a result the cost of borrowing for the firms increased, and also you know that this is lead to the increase in the cost of production for the firms. I'm also showing you some more data on how the annual inflation looked at 1980 to 1984. This is the monthly data in the 1980s. You can see the 2-digit inflation. Then in 1981 again you can see 2-digit inflation. But by 1981 also there is 2-digit inflation. But by the end of 1982-83, the magnitude of inflation declined. I'm also showing you some more data to get the more severe picture of this, to understand the severe magnitude of the recession during that period. You can see that the unemployment rate, how it moved over the years, as well as inflation. You can see it has been increasing over a period of time. So I have some more data. I would suggest you go through these slides and get more insights on this data, unemployment data. I would also suggest you collect from web lots of data regarding unemployment, output, and price during this period to get a more in-depth understanding of the recession during this period. Let us also discuss what are the policy intervention initiated to cure the recession. One is loosening the contractionary monetary policy. They began to follow an expansionary monetary policy so that the rate of interest will decline. The another policy intervention is mainly guided by the supply side economics. That is also a main economic wisdom believed by President Reagan he believed that strengthening the supply side of the economy is critical, because until 1970 it was Keynesian revolution. Keynesian economists believe in demand side economics, but President Reagan in 1970s, he argued that supply side economics is a key. That means the supply side of the economy should be incentivized by tax cut and also giving subsidy. So he began to give tax cut to the firms, industrial sector as well as agriculture sector, and he aggressively cuts income tax from 70% to 28% for the top tax bracket. Moreover, he cut the corporate tax, that the tax on the profit of the corporations, from 48% to 34%. The idea here is that the supply side of the economy should be incentivized, and as a result, or not only that, the people should be having more money. So he believed that the giving more tax cut, more supply side economic incentives. And he also increased the government spending. Under Reagan, government spending increased 2.5% annually. And also they made effort to reduce the oil price. Then it comes the third episodes in economic history, that is called the period of great moderation. The period between 1980s and 2007 was considered as a time of macroeconomic stability. It is called the period of great moderation. Though there was a recession in 1990-91 and 2000, but those recessions were not so severe. So apart from that, what we can see that from 1980s to 2007, there was no major recession. However, you can see that the period of great moderation got an end in 2007-2009 by the great recession of this period. That you can see that initially it was a real estate crisis, later on it became a financial crisis, and by 2009 it became a full-fledged economic crisis, that is a recession. So let me show you some data and insights on the period of great recession. So just look at the percentage change in GDP over time. So you can see that from this period to this, especially 1950 and 1955, this time there was slight fluctuation. When from this period to the 1980 to 2007, this is the period of stability. This is the period of stability. So we call this is the period of great moderation. So the wide fluctuations and business cycle during early decades of post-war period was there, but however, it dampened out between 1980 2007, and as I mentioned, this is called the period of great moderation. When it comes to the inflation, this variable also you can see before 1985 and after 1985, you can see this period, the period of great moderation, you can see that there is stability in inflation as compared to the previous period. Similarly, about the long-term unemployment also, during this period, the 1930, this period to this period, you can see there was a kind of moderation or stability. So what we have done in this session was that we discussed three major macroeconomic episodes. One is 1970s crisis, where we discussed 3-4 major causes, including oil price shock, collapse of Bretton Woods system, steel crisis, and the oil price shock. Then subsequently we discussed 1981-82 crisis, and then we discussed the period of 1980 to 2007 as the period of great moderation. An important point to remember here is that since what we can see that from 1980 to 2007, there was no major economic crisis. This was actually overall most economic variables were stable. However, there was some kind of hidden vulnerabilities. Though economy may seemingly it may be calm and quiet, but what this means that this kind of quietness actually leads to some, it actually contains some hidden vulnerabilities that came into the full extent by 2007-9 crisis, that we are going to discuss in the next session. Thank you for watching this session, and see you in the next session. Thank you.